They promote homophobia, they promote violence and terrorism, and they have no place in this country.
And now we're on. Okay. Good evening. This is Andy Ace 83, and as you can hear, we are again talking in English. And the reason for that is that we have another international guest. But first, let me introduce the usual people, and that is Inge. Hello, Inge.
Hello, hello.
And Unar.
Hey, hey.
And finally today is Martin Sellner from Generation Identity. Hello, Martin.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Now, Unar, you have already met this guy, haven't you?
That's right. We in Ekte Nyheter invited him to talk in Oslo, and we had a very interesting experiment. We were going to have like talk about freedom of expression and the problems surrounding that alternative voices are not presented properly or misrepresented in the media. So we wanted to bring in alternative voices from various minority groups or silent majorities. But we had one rule. We said, we don't want to have any extremists. So when we wanted to talk with climate skeptics, for instance, we didn't want anyone believing in aliens or stuff like that. We wanted to have really good, solid, moderate scientists. And when we wanted to also talk about immigration and the problems surrounding that, but we didn't want to have like neo-Nazis or anti-Semitic groups or something like that. So we looked in Europe if we could find someone who represented the silent majority, a moderate group. And then we came across Generation Identity, and we looked through and everything looked fine. This is fantastic. We have found a really moderate, mainstream, middle of the road like group which is concerned with identity and ethnicity and all of this. So we invited Martin Sellner, who said graciously said yes, that was very good. And then we experienced that the Antifa got a hold of this, and they said, "Oh my goodness, we have invited like Nazis, and there were protests in the street, and there was even terror attack, not attacks, but threats of terror attacks against this." So we were very, very surprised by this. How did you experience this? Is this just another Tuesday for you, Martin, or was this new?
Actually, I wasn't surprised by it at all. It's basically my daily life that Antifa is trying to demonize us. I just came back from a speech that I gave in Upper Austria, and there also they put a lot of social pressure on the venue, so they had to cancel it, and I need to move it. That's what they're always doing, and I can say from your lips to God's ear, I also think that what we are saying, what we are claiming is not extreme in any way, but the problem is the leftists are dominating the media, and from their subjective perspective, everybody who's not following the ideology is an extreme.
We have I've developed what we call the Churchill test. Like if you have views that are more moderate than Winston Churchill, then you are not a horrible person, and you are not far right, or you're not Nazi or something like that. Of course, Churchill would be regarded as a Nazi today if he was living today, because he was very strong. He was a patriot, and he had strong opinions about a lot of things, including Islam.
Absolutely.
So you passed the Churchill test, no problem at all. But
looking forward to it.
Yeah, since then we've learned that we were very, very naive, because only later, a few months later, we found out that Ben Shapiro, an American conservative, classical liberal Jew, he was branded a neo-Nazi by Antifa, a Jew. It's fantastic. The fact that the media talks about this all the time as if this is true shows how the media really is.
I think that's the main point for people to understand, that what's today called the middle ground, you know, and the center, objectively is already very, very leftist, because the political window, the Overton window, has been shifted to the left. And that's why people like Churchill, but also our politicians in Germany and in Norway, I'm sure, 30 years ago, for nowadays standards, would be extremist, racist, xenophobe, and so on. Not because their opinion changes, but because the Overton window changes, and what's considered centrist is actually objectively very, very leftist. It is, and nobody today is safe anymore from this accusation. That's the problem.
So
the revolution will eat its own children. Isn't that what they say?
Yeah, absolutely. So, but it means actually it's a challenge, because it means for everybody who's really interested that he really has to investigate the things on his own, because he cannot trust those words and the media judgment anymore. He has to listen to things himself. And I'm glad that many and more people are doing this, especially people who will listen to this podcast now. They want to find out for themselves.
And speaking of that, how about you talk a little bit about your ideology, generation identities ideology? I'm sure that the listeners would love to hear more about who this group is who's being demonized like this.
Actually, it's for us, it's a very easy and simple thing. We don't have this huge ideology. We don't have a red book like Mao and a closed system that has an answer to everything. We have a very basic and simple agreement, and this is that we want to maintain, we want to preserve the identities of the European people. That's what we want to do, and it means we want to preserve our culture, our way of life, this generation-spanning we that we have, and that we see as the basis for democracy, for social solidarity, and also for the rule of law and for a peaceful society. And we see this threatened today by massive immigration, by Islamization, and by what we call the Great Replacement. And we want to fight for preservance of this ethno-cultural identity, not because we're obsessed by it. I know that personal identity consists of many shapes and layers, but because today it's a taboo, you're not allowed to talk about it. There's no open, free debate about it, and that's why we say, okay, we want to preserve this identity by a policy of closing the borders, de-Islamization, and remigration of illegals, and that's basically everything. That's the whole thing.
Well, I hope it's a little more than that. What I like the most about generation identity is that you push the homeland argument, the argument of rightful ownership of land, where ethnicity of people have lived for a very long time, for many thousands of years.
Absolutely. I think that's of course, you know, when you go back in a very long time, there've always been history where one people has taken the land from another. So I think that's actually, like, if you really go back, then there's maybe not the history of a piece of land, but more the history of tribes, peoples, and cultures. But while we are fighting for our right to preserve our identity and our sovereignty in this nation, we of course also defending the right of all the other people. And the interesting thing is that if you look around in the world, for example, you know, we have the Sami people. Then there are a lot of people who are a lot of guys, especially on the left, who are rallying for Tibetans and for indigenous tribes. So they see all of these identities as valuable and as worth preserving. And we are just claiming the same right for our own identities and cultures.
Ethno-pluralism.
Exactly. That's how Alain de Benoit called it. And basically, ethno is like the people and the culture. Pluralism means a plurality. And by that, we understand the basic situation of the world as being plural. So there is a difference of languages, cultures, and ideas, and this difference means that you cannot create a total one world order and system without overruling, eradicating, or suppressing the others. And so we are against globalism, against universalism, against these ideologies who want to create an end of history, a one world order, and who see this pluralism of cultures and of identities basically as a negative thing. And we don't see it as a negative thing. We see it as a positive thing. We want to preserve it. We respect the others and we love our own. That's the basic understanding. And that's why we, of course, are not chauvinistic or racist or hating other people in any way. And we're rejecting these imperialistic and suprematic ideologies, and just want to basically preserve our homelands and our identity in our own lands.
And that point you made with the Samis, I've noticed you made it before, and also with other examples like the Tibetans and Palestinians and so on. I think that's a very good point, because it shows also, it's a good point in itself, but it also shows the constant double moral from the European socialists, I think.
Hypocrisy.
According to the leftist socialists, apparently there's a magical ability of Europeans, and only Europeans, to produce racist and nationalistic ideologies. All the other people are unable to do that. Yeah, and only Europeans, by every patriotic claim they do, magically it becomes racism and nationalism, and that is we call this ethno-masochism. Basically, it's a completely neurotic approach to your own ethnic identity and ethno-cultural identity. It's like a new Victorian age where the taboo, you couldn't even talk about legs, the taboo was sex, and the taboo of today's so liberal and so free society is, of course, your own identity.
What I usually refer to it is as like the guilty Nazi.
Yeah.
If suppose there is someone who has the complete Nazi ideology, accepts white supremacy and all of this, but feels very guilty about it. Now, how would that person behave if he held all the views of white supremacy but felt really bad about it?
I'm in favor of making things more equal.
Okay, but I'm not. I'm making things more free. And freedom naturally will cause inequality.
Entails discrimination. Freedom allows white men to control everything.
Oh my God, you're a white supremacist. You are actually a white supremacist with a guilty conscience, Thomas. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ.
Well, he would be essentially a progressive. He would say that since the white race is the superior race, and it did something bad, it has to be held to a higher moral standard than everyone else, and so we have to be punished for our crimes. And in fact, they think in racial terms, progressives, because if you look at what happened in the past, this was not done by any living European. And yet, living Europeans, based solely on the color of their skin, has to take moral responsibility for what some people in the past did to people who are no longer alive. But so this is pure racism.
It's easy if you ask a German, for example, are you proud of Goethe, of Bach and Mozart? You say, well, not really, because I had any part in the works. Patriotism is stupid, but of course you feel guilty of Hitler. And this is yes, of course. So they are very they have like this double think of Orwell. And also, as you said, it's a way of condescending racism. They think that the white man is like this Superman who is responsible for everything. All the other people have no agency. And everything that is going wrong in the world is either a fault of us because we have acted negatively, or it is a fault of us because we have not yet created a paradise, a world paradise for everyone. So we need to keep our borders open. We need to let our countries being overrun, because we, as the masters of the universe, have not created this paradise world. As you said, it's just an inversion of this suprematic ideology, it's the same strain of thought, the white man's burden, that the universalistic Western syndrome of being the chosen center of the world. And we basically, as we are, a lot of us are new right thinkers, we're criticizing this. We don't want the world, we just want to preserve our identity here in Europe.
Yes, you mentioned white man's burden, and that's a famous phrase back from British imperialism, isn't it? When it was like supposed to civilize the rest of the world, it's seen as racist, but it's basically what we are witnessing now is that we are still having a white man's burden, where we are supposed to help the rest of the world, Africa, the Middle East, etc., because they are undeveloped, and it's our fault because we haven't done enough positive, or we have done too much negative in the past.
Exactly. So the white man burden is still active, but we now don't have to like the white man's privilege that Kipling and so on still was claiming, because of this manifest destiny and mission. So I completely agree with you. The only way to really understand why you have self-hatred, ethno-masochism, even if in the countries that have nothing to do with the Holocaust, like Sweden, is when you see there's a huge psychological syndrome as a psychological, neurotical answer to this ideology of imperialism, supremacy that we had before in the ages before. That's my personal opinion.
I think that the part of the problem in Sweden can be traced back to World War II, because Norway was actually invaded by Germany, and therefore we don't feel a connection to Nazism. Like, we don't feel any real guilt for that because we were on the other side. But Sweden, they were neutral, and the upper class, the elite, the echelon of Sweden, they were on the side of Hitler. So they were very fond of the Nazis, and then it turned out the Nazis were monsters, and they became very guilty. So this guilty Nazi theory that I have is specifically true for Sweden, especially for Sweden, because there they actually were very fond of Hitler.
Yes,
not ordinary people, but the elite.
Yes, that's real thought crime you're adding there, Unar. But I think it's true too that in Sweden they call themselves neutral, but history has shown that a lot of times they did support Nazi Germany when it suited their purpose. Isn't that correct?
But I can prove that they have this view still, because the prime minister of Sweden, it's only I think it was the prime minister, only a year or two ago, he proudly pronounced that Sweden was a moral superpower.
Yeah, that's it.
Now, what does that mean? It means that you're better than everyone else. How is that not like white supremacy?
The thing is, in this leftist ideology, in this narrative, it's about about moral superiority. It's all about virtual signaling, and it means feeling guilty. And the one who's committed the bigger crime can gain the most guilt out of it. So it can be like the world champion of guilt. And the Germans have created something called the guilt pride, where they're really proud of this, and where they say no other country in the world has better dealt with the history, is really feeling more ashamed about their mistakes. So still, actually, it's an idea of supremacy, but this time it's a supremacy of guilt and of self-hatred, which is not which is structurally the same, and it's not at all really overcoming this ideology. And I think that's very, very important to understand. Just one thing that I also want to add about generation identities idea and ideology. For us, it's important that we in economical issues, like in ecological issues and so on, we don't really have a clear set of standpoints, because we think that this basic agreement to preserve our identity is something that also encompasses the democratic dialogue and dissidence about several different opinions. And what we actually want to have is to maintain this dialogue, to maintain this whole history of thought and philosophy in Europe. And we see this now endangered because the basis for this, a certain level of homogeneity and solidarity and mutual trust in society, is fading away because of the Great Replacement.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Great Replacement?
Yeah, it's a term by Renaud Camus, a French intellectual. He's a very interesting and fabulous guy, and he coined this term. And he said that it means technically the combination of low birth rates of European people and of massive immigration, the policy of multiculturalism. So like even encouraging those people in their identities, and this leads to a complete ethnic and cultural replacement of European people within a few decades. And this, of course, will also destroy our identities, our legal system, the whole way of life. And this is the biggest problem, actually the biggest crime that's happening now, that we're not able to talk about it, because it's completely irreversible. And it's, I think, in political, social, cultural, and even evolutionary terms, the biggest thing and the most dangerous thing happening in Europe for thousands of years.
But how it started in France, right? Or have I misunderstood?
The movement started in France, and in October 2012, on the rooftop of a mosque in Poitiers. That's where the movement started, with an action.
Okay, and it's spread across how many countries now, you think? I think it's in Norway at least, but how many countries are you aware of have this has taken part in this movement?
At the moment, we have real established GIs, like you're really open with spokespersons and have a history and a track record of actions in France, in Austria, Italy, and Germany. And we have movements and people who are gathering in the UK, in Hungary, in Norway, and the Czech Republic, in Slovenia, and in actually many other countries. There are even people who are interested in Denmark, in the whole Scandinavia. So I think everywhere in Western and Central Europe, you need a generation identity. I think for maybe other countries, also Eastern Europe, I think it's a bit different. They have a different situation. But if you have in Europe massive immigration plus political correctness, you need a form of an activist group who is fighting and standing up against it.
But what do you have to say to people who are concerned about issues like far right or national extremism and like this? If people Google your name, they will find in your like a Wikipedia that you have a past in an extremist nationalist movement in your youth. So they will say, "Oh, what is this? What happened? What is this moderate? What's going on?" What's your response to that?
Yeah. Actually, I talk about it, and I like to talk about it, but because I see here's the primal problem. There was no middle ground talking about these issues and questions, about massive immigration or identity. You always have to decide between multiculturalism or going full like racist and chauvinistic and neo-Nazi. Because the media, they maintain this dichotomy by destroying and basically slandering every group and every platform and every role in society that could criticize mass migration in a reasonable way. And when I was young, 15, 16, I wanted to get politically active. I was patriotic and I wasn't in the mood to join a party. I wanted to go on the street. I wanted to do demonstrations. If I would have been leftist, there would have been a huge variety of groups, from attack and socialist students and whatever, completely accepted by society, where I could have engaged and basically out my opinion. In the patriotic scene, there was no alternative when you want to become active and go on the street than joining one of these radical right-wing groups. And so I got into subculture, into scene, the music, and I read all these books. But at some point I understood, and I was actually serving our enemy. I was becoming the villain in their narrative, a scarecrow, basically scaring people away and also completely feeding their narrative. And at this point, I understood that also this whole ideology, the old problems of the old right ideology of racism, of nationalism, of anti-Semitism. And then I came across the writings of the new right, especially Alain de Benoit, Guillaume Faye, and others. And I understood that we need a revival, a reformation of this thinking, of these ideas. And that's when we founded Generation Identity, which is following these ideas and understandings, isn't nationalistic, racist, or anti-Semitic, just wants to preserve our ethno-cultural identity and is transparent and open. And for me personally, it's a very important thing to give the patriotic youth in Austria a way to put the rightful anger and frustration in a meaningful and effective political way and bring it on the streets. And that's why I don't see this history of me as a negative thing, as a repercussion. It's a very important thing. I made a lot of important experiences there, so I really know what I'm talking about when I say that I'm not this, not that, and that I've understood what it is about.
I understand, and I've spoken to people, places that are extreme left-wingers, and I was fascinated by how they are portrayed as either not talked about at all. Una called them Antifa, and I'm aware of that. But when you said the people, you called them Antifa, were you actually talking about Blitz, the Norwegian Blitz, or is Antifa now a Norwegian thing too?
Yes, that's what I'm just talking about.
I made a selfie in front of the house in Norway, in Oslo when I was there. Yeah, the Blitz guys. Yeah.
Yeah, because they are normalized. It's okay that we have extreme left-wingers. And I talked to one of them. I will never forget it. It was when Condoleezza Rice was in Norway. I don't know if you guys remember that, but Condoleezza Rice was in Norway. And he was in Oslo actually, and he threw stones at police. And the way I reacted, I was trying to be stoic and like, really? Okay. Like I wasn't shocked because I knew that he was a Blitz, but the point is that I didn't want to like get in on my high horse and condemn him. But I was really fascinated by the thing that he justified violent acts against police officers because he did not like a person on the who spoke in Norway for whatever reason. I don't remember why she was there, but they threw rocks at police, and I said, aren't they humans too? And he was like, he didn't have any good reply, that's for sure. But the thing, he thought it was a badge of honor to be arrested, a badge of honor that he was in Oslo and causing violent ruckus. And he talked to me like it was nothing to be ashamed of. And I didn't condemn him because he probably had his reasons for being whoever he was. I don't understand why we have to be so extremely. I think tolerance and understanding has to go. I don't think it would have been productive if I started yelling at him. That's my point.
I'm not yelling, but I would try to take the stone out of his hand, because we can accept different opinions, but people who want to become terrorists and basically deny others the right of free speech and want to dictate on who can be part of the debate and who not, and who say punch a Nazi, and at the same time claiming the right to define what is a Nazi and who can be seen as a Nazi. I think those people are very dangerous. And
yes,
actually, they're terrorists.
I think Condoleezza Rice to him was a Nazi. That no doubt about that. She probably a member of the KKK according to him. So that's how it worked.
Well, I think I have to protest a bit about the terminology used, because I don't like the left-right model to begin with, but if we are going to use it, I think it's very important to not accept National Socialists, Nazis, or fascists to be on the right with conservatives and libertarians and classical liberals. And both Onar and I have written about it, for me anyway, partly in reference to arguments and proofs provided from people like Dinesh D'Souza, Bill Whittle, Andrew Klavan, others. Lastly, I guess most internationally known, the book the big lie from Dinesh D'Souza.
That's right.
Do you have discussions on these things in generation identity?
Not really. I think we also try to avoid left and right. I think those words actually, in a way, have lost their meaning. For me, the divide, the political divide at the moment is more between the people, populists or patriotic identitarian people, guys, who are for multipolar world and identities, and globalists. And if you see, for example, left-wing radical Antifa completely lining up with actual doctrines and ideas of international globalist corporations, you know, it's very hard to see like who's here left and right. And also in Austria, in France, and Germany, you've seen the Green Party and communistic parties rallying up together with a neoliberal parties, basically, or even libertarian parties, to just prevent the rise of Le Pen. So I think actually, for me, that the line of division is if you see this massive immigration as a problem, if you understand that the great replacement is happening, Islamization is happening, and if you want to do something against it. And here I think we can welcome people who are whether traditionally Catholic, conservative, or libertarians, paleo-conservatives. So I think I agree with you. I don't think in the terms of left and right. And I think it's also a bit petty to say now, okay, actually Nazis were leftist or right-wing guys. I think it's very complicated because the meaning of left and right-wing, it changes. For me, an important phrase, totalitarian. I think all the ideologies of the 20th century, Nazism, communism, and in a way also what's happening now out of our liberal democracies has totalitarian traits, and that's what we're against.
Yes, you have had experience with the press, haven't you? And how they let's call it hound you.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything I do is basically screened by them. And once I made a Facebook post with a few errors in it because it was I made like an audio message just automatically transferring the text, and there was even an article in a big German newspaper about it. So it's really, I can't do anything without them reporting about it. But in a way, they're also helping us and helping our agenda, because for every report by the media, there's a click-through rate of people who actually want to get the full story, and then they end up at our homepage or on a video like this, and they make up their own mind. And mostly it comes out good for us.
Yes, because I saw your documentary Undercover, not your documentary, but the documentary about you and other people called Undercover Inside Britain, Far Right. The first thing is on ITV. I noticed that the term, I should have counted it, I was a bit lazy, but the term far right, I wonder how many times they threw that out in that documentary. It's over and over again. Far right, far right, far right.
Far right. Far right terrorist.
The far right.
By Britain's far right. The far right is back.
We've got the kind of widening of the far right.
The new far right. But who are these activists driving the new far right? Carefully copying the images and language of the far right.
Here lies in the threat of the far right. They say that they aren't racist or they aren't far right, but they are defending their vision of Europe.
Hazel is about to be recruited by European far-right group, Generation Identity. Anyone watching would think they were just a group of students.
These people are far more dangerous.
When in this extreme far-right movement, it's inside Britain's far right.
In far-right narrative.
Far right. And I, as I said, I saw it, and that's
one of the reasons why I think it's so important to correct this history revisionism.
I can link up one of the articles I have written called "The Nazi Left." It will be in this description of this video, where I explain how Nazism really was a creature of the left originally. It's called National Socialism for a reason. But I agree with that there was all this far right talk about far right. But what really struck me when I saw that, I wanted to see this documentary, and I didn't feel that this was a real documentary at all. It was a farce, because my view of what a documentary is supposed to be, and if you read about what a typical objective documentary is supposed to be, is that you give both sides an opportunity to speak their minds, and they get a chance to look at the edit and to give their input to the documentary. So you get both sides of the issue. But there were no both sides here. There was only one side, and it looked like they were looking for dirt, and when they didn't find any dirt, they sort of had to clip in neo-Nazi groups in between to make an association with generation identity. It's like for people who don't know anything about generation identity and who are unconscious, they will see this and think that GI is a far-right group. But it was a hack. It seemed like a hit piece.
They always do this, and they always lump everything together, and always they every demonstration they cherry pick like the most negative looking people. While on the contrary, when it's about immigrants and Muslims, they cherry pick the women and children and the nice faces. It's a complete act of hypocrisy. But as I said again, I think. Basically, after this documentation, which was planned and intended to be a hit piece because of working together with Hope Not Hate, it was really like what they wanted to prove for them was clear in the beginning, even before they even started to gather information. Proof, of course, in their idea. But after this hit piece, many people wrote us, and we got a raise in people who were signing up for memberships or raising donations. So actually, just like for DIF in Europe, it had a completely contrary effect of their intention. And that's where the beauty comes in. That's where the left is becoming a victim of their own fanaticism and their own hatred.
I noticed that when they clipped, they cut and edited, even if they tried their very best to find the worst statements they could find, there were so few of them that they had to fill up the documentary with things that were perfectly normal.
The funny thing is, even I think it must have been very disappointed, because this Hazel girl, she was with us at this Airbnb. We were drinking beers, we were making fun and jokes, and she couldn't find anything. And actually, my presentation, I explained our understanding of ethnocultural identity and why we are not, we cannot be racist or nationalists, and why we cannot be anti-Semites. And she even quoted me when I said it's a complete strategical and theoretical failure, in my opinion, to talk about all these attacks and aggressions against Jews. So actually, she didn't find anything, and it must have been very, very disappointing for her. And as I said, the good thing about it is, we have no second agenda. What we say and what I say here in this podcast, what I say in a private Skype conversation, we are talking intensely privately in a flat. It's always the same. It's a very consistent thing, because it's also very easy to understand.
I can attest to this. I'm a witness, because we talked in private when you were in Oslo. And I remember, this was like talking in public. There was no filthy or dirty things being said or something like that.
The crazy thing is also, of course, they've completely cut out and taken statements out of context. For example, they quoted one where they say, I completely understand that in the 1920s, people said that there's a Jewish question. I said, because they, you had all these ideologies there. And then what they cut away, the further thing I said, is that they actually, by a misunderstanding, because they were thinking that all the problems of modernity, uprootedness of people, the mass of society, and all the industrialization, all that blaming this on a group of people, or to the Jews, creating horrendous crimes and deaths. And I concluded why we as Generation Identity are fighting against a system, against ideologies, not against a group of people. So that was the full quote, what I said, and then they just cut out one phrase. It's completely complete crazy thing. But not crazy. It's a very, very. You see that they had a very bad intention. But I think that everybody who really wants to get into that, and that's our target audience. My target audience are not people who are convinced by a hit piece and who just believe the the superficial message. Our target audience are people who really want to go into the deep, who want to investigate on their own, and those people will very soon find out about the real nature of a movement and about this documentary.
Yes, because I saw this documentary and it seemed like a propaganda piece. If the female voice was replaced by a man's voice, then I think it would be a much clearer to the audience that this is propaganda. Because first off, you have a voice of God, as it's called in documentary filmmaking, which is often used in propaganda. It's like, fear these people, communists are bad. And then you have this choice of music. I don't know if people are aware of that, but the choice of music was supposed to be scary. It was silence when the people from what that group was called, Hate for Peace or Peace for Hate or Hope for Peace. No, Hope for whatever that group was called. They were quiet then, and then when you saw these people, it was always scary music, and that is what you do in propaganda. It's basically charged and manipulative editing to enforce that they are to be feared. They use the word explicitly. They are a threat. They are a threat to democracy. And what's funny is that at some point they talk about, again, right-wing extremists, about a group that is called National Action, and I don't know who they are, which was the first far-right group to be banned under terrorism legislation. And what they said is, I'll add it in as a soundbite.
They promote homophobia, they promote violence and terrorism, and they have no place in this country.
But they were basically describing Islam. And that was what's funny, is that if taken out of context, we could actually make it seem like this woman was speaking about Islam. They promote homophobia, they promote violence and terrorism, and have no place in this country. And if they said that about Islam, if this woman said they promote homophobia, they promote violence and terrorism, and they have no place in this country, and it was about Islam, it would be hell to pay. But of course she was talking about the far right, the far right, the far right, the
far right terrorist,
the far right,
far right.
And that's where I really can't respect those people anymore, because I also know it. And this whole neo-Nazi thing, it's like a media phenomenon, and many people in this scene are actually federal agents. It's not a conspiracy theory. In Germany, they wanted to ban the National Democratic Party, like the most extreme nationalist party, and they couldn't ban it because too many people accused in this whole process were informants for the police. So actually a majority, almost half the people they wanted to accuse and that would have been in the process were federal agents. So that was why they couldn't ban this party. And I think the real incompetence and the treason of the left is that facing the real threat for democracy, the Islamization and the ethnical fragmentation of society, the great replacement, they are just creating fake issues, fake problems, and completely diverting. And that's something I think in the face of history, in a few decades, people will understand this, and then it will look very bad for those fearmongers.
I noticed interesting thing about that National Action Group. They had a clip where they marched in the streets, and they looked exactly like Antifa.
Seriously.
They did.
That's true. That's also it's something that also we experience. I experienced in the old right or right wing groups or nationalistic groups, better to say, in Europe. They were completely taking over the style of Antifa. They were fighting against police, and they were like also starting to smash things. And I think it's like a radicalization spiral and battling against Antifa. What we actually want as Generation Identity, also to move from a theoretical understanding to the way we want to achieve it. We want to achieve an open and free and fearless debate about those issues, because without this debate, we cannot have a political solution. And we know that there's a silent majority of people who want to talk about it, but who are afraid and who don't want to pay the social costs. And that's why we activate and we encourage young people to show their face, to stand up, to crash this emotional barrier. And if you look at the pictures of generations and actions of generation identity and demonstration of generation identity, you see an image that's completely different. You see many completely normal young people who are showing their face. That's our target audience. That's also what a group consists of, and everybody who wants to really make up his mind about this and want to get no impression just needs to come to one of our actions, one of our demonstrations, and to one of our meetings, and everything, all the lies of the media just crumble when he sees the guys who are actually part of our movement.
Yes, if I may intercept again with the thing is, as I said with this documentary, or we have to call it a documentary because they do follow the genre rules anyway. But I was so fascinated by it, like the choice of the voice of God, the propaganda voice, in that how charged it was and how you were supposed to condemn them when the people in this video. And I remember another part, and that's when this woman, I don't know who she is either, but it was called Waters. I don't know if anybody knows who this woman is, but they say
in public, Waters has made extreme statements. But in the car, in private, she's even more blunt.
I can't bear the idea of girls being treated like shit.
I started to laugh because it's ridiculous. Yeah. This is supposed to be, you're supposed to be horrified by what this woman says, and what she basically is saying is, I can't bear the idea of girls being treated like. When did this become an outrageous statement?
But it's also especially serious in Britain, given the grooming situation they've had there, more extreme than any other countries we know about.
Yeah, so talking about the Rotherham incident, and that was not addressed at all in the documentary, but the first soundbite from the documentary was, get those pedo Muslims off our street. And that was, I guess it was supposed to be a reference to the Rotherham incident, and I think it was also another incident recently.
Oh, it's many.
Yes, it's many.
Many cities have experienced these
and
things.
It's not mentioned in this documentary at all.
Exactly.
Grooming, actually, in the UK, the amount of grooming has risen in a significant number during the last years. It's getting a more and more insecure and dangerous area for young girls who are not Muslim to grow up in the UK. That's fact.
Yes, it's horrible.
Absolutely.
I want to push back a little bit on the great replacement.
Yeah.
Like, I understand the idea that we are being replaced because of low birth rates and because of immigration to replace us and so forth. But I think that there's a dynamic here that is not taken into account, which makes it the outlook look much less bad than it looks when you just make a linear extrapolation.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fact that when you look at Europeans and the birth rates as a whole, it looks very bad. But then you start looking at what groups of Europeans have low birth rates and who have high birth rates. And you find out it's the left wing who have low birth rates.
Yeah.
The conservatives have a high birth rate. So the great replacement, if we ignore for a moment the immigration, there is a great replacement going on, and that is replacing leftists who don't have children with conservatives who do have children. So that is a positive trend, and it counteracts the great replacement, because yes, you have falling birth rates, but there is a core of people who maintain high birth rates, and they will continue to have high birth rates.
And that's, you know, that's why I always say the great replacement is the combination. So if you take one part out of it, it's not longer a great replacement. Actually, our society is changing and it's shrinking. And if you see that Europe has been completely overpopulated, if you look at the new technological revolution of society, where most of the jobs will fade away and automatization will be the next big thing, it's completely crazy. It's sheer madness to import, especially to the UK, for example, to this overcrowded continent that cannot feed its own population without imports of food, more and more unskilled young men who are highly prone to violence and who will find no jobs because they don't have the skills, and also those jobs will fade within the next decades. It's like a recipe for social upheaval, and without this massive immigration, actually we really could also see positive effects going on here, and I think shrink maybe into a more positive size and then just catch it up. This demographic decline on a better state. I think you're right, and that's why we always say that great replacement is the combination of the low birth rates and the massive immigration, the policy of multiculturalism.
So regarding demographics, I noticed it's not only the total number of different ethnic groups. It's also a shift in terms of balance between females and men.
Exactly.
Women and men. Especially, this has been reported in Sweden. They are reported to have gone to, just since 2015, to a worse situation in that area than even India.
Yeah.
Is this an argument you use in the generation identity?
Absolutely. That's also one of the big crimes of the feminists, basically. And those who claim to be feminists, that they let this happen, and they're creating a toxic and dangerous environment for girls, because all of these men, they come here and they they expect, because of the propaganda of the human traffickers, that they'll find a house here, a car here, and a girl here. They don't bring a house, they don't bring a girl, they don't bring a car. So there will be a huge competition. There will be a lot of violence, and I think it's really, really irresponsible. It's really a crime to create this demographic bomb, and our job is to dismantle it, to counteract it, to pull the brake, and then just to reverse these tendencies and dynamics to ensure a secure future for the people here in Europe.
Okay, but anyway, you also did something this summer, didn't you, that caused a little bit of a media ruckus, if I remember correctly. The Defend Europe thing. You remember that?
Absolutely, yeah. How could I forget? What you're seeing behind me was the worst nightmare of all the lefts in the world, of Soros, the NGOs, and the whole migration lobby. Why I I came to the UK because after Defend Europe, we had so much interest that we needed to go there to help the people. Otherwise, they would have started on their own, would have become uncontrollable. And I remember when we were sitting in Norway in the friend's room talking about this idea, people were very fascinated, but they couldn't really believe it at this moment. I also couldn't really believe it, but we really just did it. We chartered the ship from Djibouti and we went in front of the Libyan coast to overwatch and to police the NGOs there, to cooperate with the Libyan Coast Guard in their efforts to secure the coastline against the work of these NGOs, who are basically acting as taxis and as a taxi service for human smugglers and human traffickers, making them billions. It was so far the biggest, the most demanding and the most rewarding project of a movement, and it really propelled us forward a huge big leap.
I can add something there, that one argument which is never mentioned in Europe is that you had the same kind of human trafficking to Australia a few years back.
Exactly.
With boats, and thousands were dying on the ocean. But once Australia said, we have a zero tolerance for this form of human trafficking, all the dying on the ocean stopped. So in other words, the people who say that we are going to allow this human trafficking, they are inviting death for migrants who are dying in the Mediterranean. Yeah. So in other words, if we can do what Australia did, that would actually save thousands of lives of those who are trying to cross the Mediterranean.
The stop the boat policy, that's what we demanded for Europe, an Australian solution. And after we finished the mission and during the course of a mission, the whole situation turned around completely. The goal of our mission was really to work as to speed up the whole legal process, to embarrass and force the governments to act. And after they finally did what we wanted to, I think also in a way pressured by our presence there, the dying in the Mediterranean stopped. And almost no one drowned there after the NGOs stopped. And now the NGOs are investigated, the donations are going down, some of them need to sell their ships, the Italian police is investigating, and that's just is proving us right. Those people, those NGOs were luring the migrants into the sea, were causing many of them to drown, and also, of course, breaking the law thousands and hundreds of thousands of times by bringing illegals to European soil.
So next year, 10 GI boats.
Yeah, it will definitely go on, because a lot of people contacted us. Many people even wrote us, said, I will quit my job, I want to come on this ship, I want to do something. And we have got a lot of experience, and I can say if it goes on again, it becomes huge again in spring, in front of the Libyan coast, in the Black Sea, wherever, and our politicians fail again to step in, then we will stand up and it will definitely go on. Defend Europe is here to stay. It's basically a volunteering of European patriots to protect the European borders by peaceful methods, by going there and overwatching where the European Union is failing.
Excellent. Are there any other plans for the future for Generation Identity?
At the moment, actually, I'm traveling around Mother Europe, meeting people who are interested because of Defend Europe, because of the nice work of the leftist media. So also thanks to ITV and to the advertisement, basically. And we are organizing meetups and meetings with people in the UK, but soon also in Scandinavia, to present GI to them, to see if they fit to us and our movement fits to them. And our goal is really to make GI now really a European phenomenon, because I think every European country where you have no freedom of opinion needs a GI, and every European country where you have social costs, when you want to talk openly about migration, Islamization, has no freedom of opinion. Our job is to reduce these social costs by non-violent activism, by encouraging the silent majority. That's our vision, that's our goal. And my vision is a Europe where nobody needs to be afraid of his job, of his friends, of his life, when he talks openly about these issues.
I have a comment about the Australian situation, Onar.
Okay.
mentioned. Because given that that empirical experience and evidence was available, I think it says a lot about the behavior of the European establishment, leaderships, multiculturalists, that they ignored it. I think it says a lot that their motivation cannot be humanitarian. It cannot be saving people. That is the conclusion one has to draw. Also, a question to Martin. This argument, well, I think it's undisputable that any given sum of money would help a lot more people outside Europe in the near areas, etc. Do you have any good? Do you push this argument, and do you have you achieved good documentation for this and can use it in presentations, etc., from solid sources, etc.?
Absolutely. I think that the main problem of our time is this massive movement of migration that is keeping the immigration countries poor. This exodus is damaging in many ways, as for example Paul Collier has put in his book Exodus, shown in his book Exodus, and is destabilizing and completely overwhelming the immigration countries. And this is a huge problem of our times. And I think to overcome it, we need to have borders here, a clear stop of illegal and non-European Islamic immigration, and also we need to create perspective at place, because it's a myth that people are leaving the countries because they are so poor, or because they are starving. They leave the countries because there are no perspectives there. There are no jobs there. They have no goals there, and all the money they have just goes into paying the human traffickers. This needs to end. So we need to create perspective in those countries there. So I think there would have been plenty of opportunities, and actually there are people like in Senegal, a rapper named Matador, who is encouraging desperately his fellow countrymen to stay in the country, and he's calling out the European Union, the European countries, that they're not doing enough to create perspectives in those countries, that those people stay there.
Also, the environmental global warming argument, I think, is quite interesting. I'm a skeptic to the whole global warming agenda myself, but the multiculturalists are typically very fond of the official global warming climate perspective.
Yeah.
Do you use that? I mean, how would it affect all these people, extra people coming to Europe?
I think you don't have to be an environmentalist also to understand that this massive immigration is very bad for the natural sphere in Europe. There was even a movement in Swiss called Ecopop, just ecologists and environmentalists who said they need to stop immigration to Switzerland because it's destroying the natural resources. I think that no matter how you put it and how you twist and turn it, this huge replacement of population, the replacement migration, the huge immigration to Europe is not solving any problems at the countries of origin of those people. And it's also not a recipe against poverty, because you can never take all the poor people into your country and you will not make those countries rich. You need to change the structure of the countries where those people come from. Otherwise, they will produce more and more and more poverty. And in the end, if you, as a German politician said, if you invite Calcutta, you don't help Calcutta, you become Calcutta. And that's what's happening now to Europe.
I have a broader answer. My broader answer is that I don't for a second believe that these people who are multiculturalists and screaming racism and all of this, that they are doing this out of good intentions. I do not believe that they have good intentions. I think that Jordan Peterson, the Canadian psychologist, has it right. He says that people who grow to become very resentful tend to want to have revenge on the world, hatred for the world. So, like for instance, the Columbine killers was enacting the story of Cain and Abel in the Bible, where Cain became so furious for having failed that he wanted to have revenge on being itself, on God. So he killed his own moral ideal, Abel. And the Columbine killers is essentially this: is the resentment and in combination with arrogance creates the lust for destruction for the sake of destruction. And now this, I emphasize that this is not a conscious process. It is an unconscious drive. And I think it's also in part motivated by the notion that you give up the original sin, the idea of original sin in the Bible. Because the original sin is there to remind you that, remember that in your ear, the Satan is whispering in your ear that there might be coming things from your unconscious that is really, really bad. And you need to be aware of that not all your intentions are good. You may have things that coming up, darkness from your inner deep that are not good. And the Christian morality protects against this because of the notion of original sin. But once you give up the notion of original sin and believe that you are born good, which the left believes, it's the idea of Rousseau, that we are just born good, and that corruption by society makes us bad. This idea is very dangerous, because when they feel hatred in their heart, and they do, when the left feels hatred, they think, well, I'm born good. I cannot possibly have hate in my heart because I'm a bad person. That hatred that I feel must be my conscience speaking. It's reminding me that the person I hate is really a hateful person, and he's warning me about some dangers out there. So when they say hate speech, they really mean speech that they hate. And they're triggered by it, so they are unconscious. They're unaware of the psychological processes that makes them want to destroy the world. So they find deep satisfaction in destroying the West because they have deep resentment. They are envious and hateful and bigoted deep to the core of their being. It's not a conscious thing. It's unconscious, and it's precisely when it's unconscious that you can see evil allowed to flow freely into your behavior. Because if you're aware of your own evil, if you have a moral compass, you will stop yourself. You will say, wait, this was a bad thing to do. So my point is this, that the leftists that want to bring in the migrants, they say, yeah, let's destroy Europe in their unconscious mind. They feel this like, we're going to take revenge on the West for being so bad. But really what they really mean is that they would just want to take revenge, just like the Columbine killers wanted to take revenge on the world. They want to take down as much innocent lives before they die themselves.
I think I don't have much to add. I really think that Ona has a point here, that they really want to destroy something, that is a psychological thing, and they're full of resentment. And if you want a proof for that, you just need to come to Germany and look at the German Antifa, who really actually says we hate Germany, Germany must perish, Bomber Harris do it again. So he'll have really see it's actually a mental thing if you really want to understand the self-hating left.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Goodbye, Inge.
Goodbye. Thanks for
Goodbye, Onar.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Martin Sellner, for joining us tonight.
Goodbye. Thanks for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Beautiful.